Today we're going to be, buckle up, going back down the visions of the glories. This is has people like Lori and Chad Daybell, people like that in a chokehold. So we're reading it through the lens of what's the chokehold about, essentially, right? In layman's terms. And here we go. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Psh, sofa's there. Psh, I'm here. Psh, boys are over there. My name's Paul if you're new to the channel. If you're not new to the channel, my name is still Paul for today at least. So, y'all, we've been following this one. This is written by John Pontius. If this is my first video you're discovering, you're jumping in halfway through. So just know you're going to want to start at the beginning of the playlist. Okay, just being honest with you, but feel free to enter in here. Honestly, you could jump in anywhere here. If this interests you, then great, start from the beginning. Now, the reason we're reading this is because this is has people like Lori and Chad Daybell, people like that in a chokehold. So we're reading it through the lens of what's the chokehold about, essentially, right? In layman's terms. Keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a therapist, none of that fancy credentialed stuff up in here, okay? Only credentials we're dealing with is that sofa and this sass, all right? So my opinions on the book, all that kind of stuff are just literally me being nosy and curious, right? Literally, that's it. Be warned, I probably will go into character voices. It's just how I deal with reality when I don't want to deal with it. And we're keeping these under 30 minutes. That's my sweet spot for this book. I'd start to disassociate. My body rejects the book. Okay, if you follow me, you know what I'm talking about, right? So just know it's going to be short and sweet, and that's how we're going to do these installments. And just when I can, we'll do it. And here we go. Now, right here, we're talking spiritual childhood is next section. Okay. Instantly, we were in another place. I recognized it immediately. It was my home, where I had spent all of my childhood. The building before me was immense, stretching to my right and left as far as I could see. It consisted of many beautiful parts. There were majestic arches, tall walls, windows of every shape, stunning architecture and glorious ornamentation. The structure was made of a stone-like material, white in color but more like pearl, with gold and silver streaks that seemed to be moving slowly around larger emerald veins, as if they had occurred in natural stone. Each block of stone was about as tall as man. A long ago memory arose in my mind of watching Father create it. It had come to its present form over a long period of time, though time was just the limited way my mind understood it. It was just a continuation of the eternal now in my memory. The building had taken shape with purpose. God wanted a room to teach me in. So the building had obeyed his desire. He loved columns and representations of the beauty of his earthly creations near the tops of the columns, along the ceiling and over the doors, and it had all obeyed. I realized that some rooms had been created to teach me my first lessons of things that I would encounter on Earth. Others had been shaped to allow me to see and touch objects to teach me, such as books, art, tools, and many other things needed to prepare me for Earth life. It was less of a building than a divine place that had assumed the shape of an earthly building for my education. It could take any shape God conceived. It did not require workmanship, tools, or trades to change it. It simply flowed, and my joyful obedience into any shape he wished. My guide opened a large door that was made from a single piece of wood. There were no joints or seams, as if God had asked a single tree to assume the shape of his elaborate door. The wood was unpainted and beautifully carved with natural wonders from earth, flowers, animals, children, men, and women in loving moments. With the room beyond was a familiar entryway. The whole of what I saw radiated a sense of vibrant excitement that I was back. The walls and columns were of the same divine stone as outside. The ceiling was vaulted, resting upon four fluted columns with light radiating from everything. The floor was darker, more like a natural marble of a dark emerald green. There was a closed door to my right, a wide hallway directly before me, and another closed door to my left. My guide led me to the corridor before us. It was about 20 feet long and ended in an arched window that looked like pearl. It appeared to be fluid, with smoky white colors shifting in it. As we approached, it turned clear so that I could see through it. The large room beyond was again familiar to me. He looked at me and asked, "Do you know what this place is, boy?" I said with tears of joy streaming down my face, "I'm back home!" In my mind, I thought, this is where I used to live before I was born. I knew I was back in the spirit world where I grew up as a spirit child. Many sacred memories and scenes flowed through my mind of my spiritual childhood, which I chose not to relate here. I stood there for a long while, never entering but watching and remembering my past. Now the next section is called My Room. When I was satisfied and again ready to move on, my guide took me back to the entry and to the first door I had seen. The door opened for me as I approached. I recognized it as my room, almost like a bedroom for a mortal child, but there was no bed here. The room was about 20 square feet with a high, flat ceiling. The walls and floor were of the same material as the foyer, but with slightly different colors, lending more toward blue and mauve. I loved this room, and I felt as if it were all mine. The only furniture in the room was a large, rounded top chest sitting in the middle of the floor. It was about 3 feet by 4 feet with an arched lid and rounded corners. The top was a beautiful red with highlights of burnt orange. It was made of the same material as the rest of the home, but it was thinner and brightly colored. The sides of the chest were a vivid canary yellow. I knew that I had picked these colors and changed them often to suit my childhood whims. The lid could be opened, but there were no visible hinges. I stepped to it, and after I walked around it, I glanced at my guide questioningly. He smiled, and I slowly raised the lid. The substance gave me mortal memory, the message that it was heavy, but it felt feather-like as I opened it. Within were strange objects I had never seen in mortality. There were utensils of strange shapes and different sizes, white clothing and tools that I had used. I knew exactly what each tool and object was, for as I stood there in spirit, but since returning to mortality, that information has not remained with me. I realized that I owned them, but also that such things were common to our premortal experiences. Still, their connection to me had been a part of my early experiences. I picked up each one, looked at it, and remembered what it was for. Every object in the chest was an achievement of mine. Each object represented an accomplishment, like a trophy of sorts, of a lesson learned, ordinations I received, stages of development that I had achieved. These objects signified my worthiness and preparation to participate in the object of the lesson, not just in this world, but in the mortal world as well. These things were like certificates, authorizing me to actually do those things. Each ability and authority was gained by a long process of qualifying for and earning that authority. I had received these objects as tokens of lessons I had learned and qualifications I had achieved. Some of the objects were actual tools to assist me in that act. To my memory of these things, they seemed to me to be divine technology, objects endowed with power by God to allow and assist me in doing some necessary service or act, like the Liahona that assisted Leah's family, or the Urim and the Thummim. These words are kind of odd to me, that enabled seers to see the future. The white clothing was carefully folded and was sacred and ceremonial in nature. It was all a part of my articulation to spiritual maturity. As I picked them up, the lesson learned, the process of learning, and the joy I felt in the achievement returned to me. I treasured each object with all my heart and pondered on them, and then placed them carefully back in the chest. Nothing in the chest was a toy or a whimsical object. Everything had deep, eternal meaning to me. Each object recognized me and was happy to see and interact with me. I felt no reason to hurry. My guide was watching me, smiling and enjoying my discoveries. It was as if I had an eternity to examine them. After handling them and understanding them, I remembered the nature of the room. I realized that I had possessed the ability to change the room into anything I needed. If I desired to read a book that belonged to mortality, like scripture or a scroll written by a mortal prophet, I simply desired it, and the room would change to provide that thing to me. It came in the setting it had been used, in a palace, a cave, or on a desk. This is how it appeared to me. I could touch it, pick it up, and read it. I could feel and even smell it. It was not the actual object summoned from some eternal storage vault, but a flawless spiritual recreation or representation of it. Each object was perfectly like the original, including all of the memories and history a spirit individual could experience from the original object. If I wanted to see something large, such as the birth of Christ or the creation of Earth, that event would surround me. I could watch it and learn from it, interact with it, see the angels and divine beings who had enacted the original events. I could move around it and see it from every angle with perfect clarity and experience everything and everyone involved in the initial event. In short, it was magnificent, and it was the most perfect classroom in eternity, and all who desired it had one just like mine. I recalled as a child spending eternities in this room. Once again, there was no time in that world, and the concept of time, of linear existence, was difficult to comprehend then. The idea of change, aging, decay, and opposition were difficult concepts. It was like a jellyfish trying to understand automobiles. There were no comparable experiences in my childhood thus far. I remember pondering all of these concepts of mortality. Saying I spent a lot of time in this room would be incorrect. I spent vast portions of eternity here. The room never changed except as I desired. I never tired, felt hungry, or grew weary of learning. I was enthralled with all of it and did not desire to do anything else unless Father or some other need interrupted me. When I had a question, I didn't need to go to Father for the answer. The question formed in my mind, and the room changed to provide the things I needed to learn. My education was not random. It was programmed, sequential, and ordained. It was the same experience of training all of Father's children experienced, though I was aware that not all of Father's children, my siblings, were curious about all things or pursued their education with such devotion and intrigue as some of us did. Like a boy in a free candy store, I stayed in this room and interacted with these things for a long time, speaking as a mortal, until my heart was content. My guide waited for me, enjoying my enjoyment. When I was ready to go, I carefully folded everything back up and put it all back exactly where it had been. I slowly and reverently closed the chest and stood there with my hands resting upon its smooth surface. It was a long goodbye for me. I felt both my own joy and communion of those objects in the chest, all of which praised God, loved me, and longed for my return. As I walked into the entryway, I suddenly remembered my eternal siblings, mother and father. I did not remember myself as being one of the billions. I remembered uncountable siblings, all loved and loving, but I do not remember sharing father and mother with them. I only remember being individually and singularly loved and cherished. I remember Father well, his power and majesty, his face, his hands, his form, his touch and tender care. Even today I remember playing with him, running my fingers through the soft hair on his arm, laughing with him, going to divine destinations, sampling future earthly delights, tasting new things, viewing divine events, watching galaxies and eternities flare into being under his hand. To my memory, I was the only one present at these times, though there may have been multitudes of us, each of us feeling individually shepherded through childhood. Most of my spiritual childhood was spent in his tender care, in his arms, in his lap, in his heart. I remember Mother equally well being there in my pre-mortal home. She was present in all of my memories then, but almost nothing of these memories returned to mortality with me. My heart remembers her equally powerful love and personal attention to me, but I do not remember a single event with her, nor does her face remain in my mind today. I do not know why this is, but it seems consistent with Father's reverent protection of her throughout all of his dealings with mankind. The odd thing is that it feels right to me that I do not remember. As powerful as I remember her love to be, I'm spiritually content to know only what I know. Somehow this is right. I asked my guide to show me the rest of the house. He agreed happily and took me to the corridor that ended in the smoky window. We walked side by side down the wide corridor and approached the glass. It was not transparent, but milky looking with shifting colors that moved like smoke within the glass. Looking into it gave me the sensation that the glass extended to innumerable, far distant places. He just continued walking, and I followed him right into the glass. I understood as I passed through it that it was a portal that connected distant places. It felt like we were still in my home, but were now somewhere far distant. Now we're going to pause there for this reading because we're kind of getting up on my body's getting ready to reject it. Not gonna lie. Let's revisit a couple of parts for some of my thoughts on it. Okay, so let's revisit this first part, so the first couple of pages that we went over when they're talking about the rooms and the emerald colors and the, I was my spiritual before I was born and all this kind of stuff. Regardless of like what your belief is and whatnot and whatever, I'm kind of thinking about myself here through various stages in life of being like, wow, there's comfort in thinking there's something else out there, there's something else above there, there's something to go back to that doesn't have some of the nuances of our experience here on earth, right? And what I mean by the nuances is like the painful parts and whatnot, that this has a bigger meaning to it. And so with this, and often any kind of religion, so I'm not just singling this out, I feel like, and again, whatever your belief is, right, I'm kind of suspending that over here and basing this on the belief of either you think that this is it, we're just here, we die, there's nothing else, or you think that there's something else. It's comforting to think there is something else. This isn't just it. There's a reason, there's a purpose. You see what I'm saying? So when they're describing all this and like it was my home and God made this room for me to teach me and it was beautiful and endless and this and that. When I sit here and think currently in this moment of, okay, I need to go do this and I'm doing that, then I'm flying out this day, then I got to do that. You know what I'm saying? Well, wow, that's a good feeling right here, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that I'm going to try and lead the 144,000 or I'm off with Lori and Chad, but I can see the escapism of this, okay? And this could probably be said for many religions and whatnot. I'm not just again singling this out, but I think it's interesting because again, I can see the levels here of how this draws most anyone in. And then also, as I've said in all the videos about this, how when you get somebody a little bit unbalanced, it can go off the rails, right? But let's also go back to the part where he's talking about like, the certificates and earning this and the authority and going through all this stuff, whatever. This is what I'm talking about where, look at someone like Chad and Lori and the things that they were teaching and the way, like, not even that, but like the context, the holier than thou. Even Lori currently, the way she talks, think about the phone calls to Colby and whatnot. So you see how some of this like comes through in this book of like, well, I earned this certificate to teach this and do this and do that. At the end of the day, no matter what somebody says, the only person that knows if this is true is, this is a pen name, but you know what I'm saying, the author. The only person that knows, like with Lori, that she was this, that, and the other is Lori. Okay, Chad doesn't know that. He might talk about like, I saw her in the portal and I did this and that. He doesn't know, and I would probably err on the side of it's not true, but again, I'm not her, so I don't know, okay? But yeah, I would go ahead and say it probably isn't true. But again, this is just where I can just see all the pieces coming together for what we have seen put on display in the recent years. But also on the part where they talk about like, oh, not all the father's children, were experienced or had the same curiosity or whatever. Okay, so again, now I'm going to relate this to people that we know of, okay? And I'm not saying this, I don't know these people. I don't know that they thought this way. These are just my opinions. It's not fact. It's whatever, right? Sofa speculation. Okay, so take somebody like Lori versus Zulema versus Melanie Gibb, those type people. And imagine the whole dynamic here of like Lori being like, well, you're just not as curious as me. Okay, yeah, that's why you're not seeing these things, right? Okay. You're a little broken. Okay. But I can fix you. You see what I'm saying? Like that kind of a thing. So like this like otherness that's created in this concept here of, some of us got this because some of us were of this group. This is where you start getting into the, again, translate that through the portals, through Lori and Chad and this and that and the other. Because again, at the end of the day, I mean, imagine this. You're sitting here talking to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, girl. Oh yeah. When I went up into them rooms, I saw the birth of Christ. I saw the resurrection. Okay. It was like 3D, almost like IMAX, right? Okay. So imagine that. And you're over here like, I didn't see it. What's wrong with me? Something must be wrong with me. This is what I'm talking about, right? And people that have nefarious intentions and whatnot, like Lori, Chad, and whatnot, know to exploit that and make you feel lesser than, and maybe to prove yourself, if you do this, see what I'm saying? So again, overall, in addition to that, and I don't know how to describe this other than like, if you're familiar with like role-playing games like Zelda and stuff like this, like some of this feels like a quest. It's giving Zelda vibes, if that makes sense. That part of like that kind of magical world intrigues me. Again, not that I'm writing Lori and Chad talking about I'm the third 144 leader or whatever, but I'm looking at the perspective of how does this pull people in? And it seems magical. It seems delightful. It seems like an escape. It seems like all the things I mentioned, right? So that means that we're making headway, y'all. This is absolutely, we're going to get through this now. Doing this in small increments. And I've heard from several of you that are like, yeah, I can do the small increment thing, but like an hour long of this is too much. I totally agree. We found our happy medium. So anyways, if you're still watching, I appreciate it. Please drop some sofas off in the comment section for myself, Rosco and Spirit, the boys over there. So we'll have a place to sit and honestly nod off halfway through this, right? But talk about all the stuff we talk about here at this channel. And until we all meander our way down into the comment section, I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco Rosco on the Instagram. Go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.